I want to talk this evening about skepticism. That's at least what I've been assigned to talk about, and I do want to talk about it. So that's a good thing, isn't it? I want to set a context here by saying to you that we now live in a cultural milieu in which we are called to do our ministries and to engage in spiritual formation as disciples of Jesus Christ. As we seek to grow in our faith in Jesus Christ, and as we seek to invite others to join His kingdom and to grow in partnership with Him and receive the grace of God, we work and minister and engage in ministry and apologetics in a cultural context that is hostile to religious knowledge, if not to knowledge in general. The idea today is roughly that there is no such thing as at least non-scientific knowledge. To put the point a bit differently, we now live in a secularized culture where the authority centers of learning, that is, those who are the gatekeepers for what can be known and what can't be known, what can be funded to do research on, what can't be funded to do research on, what is an appropriate dissertation topic and what isn't. The gatekeepers of our culture in the universities are pretty much united on the claim that there is no such thing as religious or moral knowledge. Now, as you may know, postmodernism, which we'll say something about later, is basically the idea that there's no knowledge, period. But certainly in the secular culture that we live in, secularism first and foremost says that there's no religious and ethical knowledge. If there's knowledge at all, it would be what sort of knowledge, do you think? Scientific knowledge, that's right. So you will often get the idea that if you can test something scientifically, or perhaps verify it commonsensically with the five senses, then it can be an item of knowledge for some people, not everybody, but certainly religious claims are matters of personal opinion. They may neither be true nor false, and even if they are true or false, certainly no one can know them or even have good reasons to believe one way or the other. So we're reduced at the end of the day to forms of rhetoric and personal appeals that substitute for rational argument. Now, it's important for you and for me, I think, to know something then about skepticism as an intellectual position in order for us to be more effective in our ministries. And that's what I'd like to do this evening, is to simply lay bare a little bit about skepticism and talk to you about how to respond to the skeptic. You should have a little chart here. Who doesn't have the chart, the little handout sheet here? Does everybody else? I'm not starting with the chart. I'm heading toward it. My goal is to make the chart intelligible to you by the end of our time. Now, skepticism has been around for some time as a philosophical position. It has never been dominant. There was a period after the death of Aristotle, 300 years before Christ, up until the time of Augustine in the late 300s, where there were a couple of schools of Greek skepticism that began to flourish. And skepticism of that sort was combated effectively by Christianity, which, by the way, overtook the discipline of philosophy in classic culture. And St. Augustine, or Augustine himself, wrote a very powerful argument against skepticism called Against the Academics, or Against the Academic Skeptics. And so the point I'm making is that skepticism as a philosophical position has been around a while. It's gone underground. It kind of crept back up in Descartes' day because of becoming reacquainted through the Crusades with certain pieces of literature in the Holy Land and certain branches of philosophy. But today we find skepticism running more rampant, I think, than at any other time. I believe it's largely due to illiteracy on the part of many people in American culture. What I'd like to do then is to just say, before I go into more academic or intellectual remarks, is to remind you that what we're dealing with here is something of profound ministerial importance. This is an intellectual issue, but it's not simply that. It's a matter of deep personal concern. Why is that? Because we almost never act contrary to our beliefs. We almost always act consistently with what we believe and the degree to which we believe something. If you actually come to take it that you can't have knowledge or good beliefs about something, then that will have a strong impact on your life. that will have an impact on your life. Now, what I'd like to do then is say something about types of skepticism. I'd like to talk a bit about some general remarks regarding skepticism. I'll give you 2 arguments for skepticism. There are others, but I'll give you 2 arguments for skepticism, and then I'll respond to it. So I want to begin by kinds of skepticism. I'll say a word about some general remarks about that. Then I'll give you some arguments for skepticism, and then I'll talk about responding to it. And we'll see what kind of time we have left after that's finished. The first type of skepticism I want to mention to you is called iterative skepticism, I-T-E-R-A-T-I-V-E. The word iterative means what? Over and over again, over and over again. And the iterative skeptic is someone who simply asks the question, how do you know? Over and over again. Now, you talk to someone and they say, well, how do you know such and such? And you give them an answer. And they say, well, how do you know that? And you say, well, because of thus and so. And then they say, well, but how do you know that? And you give them an answer to that, and this sort of thing keeps going. You ever had an experience with somebody like that? Oh, okay. Well, haven't we all? Now, the thing that I want you to recognize is that the iterative skeptic can simply be ignored and dismissed. And I want to tell you why. The iterative skeptic is not really a participant in the conversation. He's just taking pot shots at the participants. You follow me on that? The iterative skeptic is not offering his skepticism as a substantial position. Okay? He's merely asking questions, he or she. So the iterative skeptic is simply sitting around asking, sort of like in drone-like fashion, how do you know, how do you know? And until the skeptic presents something on behalf of what he believes, then I think the proper response is to say to the iterative skeptic or to simply ignore him. Now let me talk to you about how to do this practically. Somebody keeps saying, how do you know, how do you know, how do you know? One thing I think you could say would be, well, you know, I've given you 2 or 3 reasons for this now, and you keep asking me the same question. Why should I think your question is at all interesting? Why should I take your question to be one that even is worthy of an answer? What makes your question an important one or an interesting question that ought to be taken seriously? Now, if the iterative skeptic doesn't answer that question, then the thing to say would be, well, until you can give me some reasons for thinking that I should take this question seriously, I would be a fool to take it seriously, because I don't think it's a serious question. And until you can give me some reason for taking the question, how do you know, seriously, then I'm going to just dismiss the question. I'm willing to listen to you if you'll give me some reason for thinking your question is a serious question. Now, if the person gives you a reason for taking his question seriously, then what you can do is to say, how do you know? Now, this is just a matter of, this is a friendly matter here. I'm not saying you don't want to be a jerk about this. But the point I'm trying to get at is, unless the skeptic can give at least some grounds for thinking that the skeptical stance should be taken seriously, then he's not really a participant. He's not really offering anything. He's not a part of a discussion. It's kind of like being in a marriage where you're trying to interact with somebody and all the other person does is just sit back and go like this. Never says anything. Or just, snarls at everything you say. They're not a part of the conversation. And iterative skepticism is not really a position. It's not a position. It's merely a posture. And I think that's important to remember.